Sonic Frontiers has sparked some discussions over whether or not it will act as a reboot for the Sonic franchise, due to its new direction and the poor reception of recent titles. It is certainly possible that this may be the case, especially seeing as how Frontiers has been stated to be Sega's example of the direction they want for Sonic over the next decade. While such conversation is all well and good, it has also naturally caused some to wonder what reboots the Sonic games have seen in the past, so as to try and predict the future. And it is in this intent where I have observed a bit of misinformation. My goal for this video is to look over Sonic's recent history to figure out how many reboots has he actually received in a way that hopefully does a good job at justifying my conclusions. As with many things in the gaming sphere, the exact definition of reboot has different meanings depending on who you ask. So that we're on the same page, the style of reboot I will be adhering to in this video refers to when something undergoes a change that ignores what had come before it and starts over from a fresh point. It may feature elements from before the reboot, but they will likely be used in different ways than before, in addition to many new elements. This is also known as a hard reboot. With that out of the way, let's begin our analysis. We're going to start at Sonic Adventure, mainly because it's one of the earliest games brought up in the debate of Sonic reboots, but also because anything before it is way too early in the franchise's lifespan to consider a true reboot. So, Sonic Adventure has been called a reboot before, but how accurate is this? At face value, you may think this claim has some merit. Sonic & Co look different, they seem to follow a different design philosophy compared to the classic games, as does the world, which has a somewhat more realistic collection of environments. Most importantly, the gameplay has changed. Pretty conclusive, right? Well, no. Sonic Adventure is not in fact a reboot of any kind. Whilst all those observations are true, the context is quite important here. Sonic Adventure may look different, but these visuals were simply an art style change. They were not supposed to indicate a new continuity, which brings up another point. Sonic Adventure is directly connected to the classics that came before it. The entire story builds upon elements introduced in Sonic 3 and Knuckles, but other references are found, such as ones to Sonic CD. Gameplay-wise, it is the same story. Looking at Sonic, it is evident he's supposed to be adapting the classic's momentum-based platforming into the third dimension. He still has the same moves, and does respond somewhat to the terrain and being curled up. The homing attack replaced the insta-shield in order to aid hitting foes in 3D, and the game still allows you to play levels over with different characters. Just because some parts of Adventure can fit into the definition of a reboot does not make it so. A reboot is supposed to commit to the intention. Smaller scale differences like seen with Adventure are just natural changes as a series progresses. Sonic Heroes, on the other hand, is a bit more interesting to talk about. There are quite a few differences to the elements established in the Adventure games. For a start, the story is far less important and developed here, and the characters are also noticeably simpler in how they present themselves to match. The gameplay has also been overhauled into its own unique playstyle with 3 formations, and the game's theming in general seems to be way more light-hearted and colourful. As I said with Adventure though, Heroes is also not a reboot. Whilst the story has taken a back seat, the past games did still happen and are referenced at numerous points in the game. Likewise, the characters are mostly the same in their relations with one another, but just operate on a smaller amount of traits. Even the gameplay, as different as it is noticeably built upon the style of Sonic Adventure with its movement, features such as grinding, and A ranking. You could possibly argue that Sonic Heroes is an example of a soft reboot, which is basically like a reboot, except that it doesn't ignore what came before it. Instead, a soft reboot acts as a point of change in a series, where everything after it may take on new qualities as if they had rebooted, and past events are often only vaguely referenced, if at all. Another important aspect of a soft reboot is how, unlike hard reboots, the change can be walked back if it did not accomplish what was intended. This is due to how soft reboots do not negate old material, so future material simply needs to ignore the soft reboot to resume as normal. Even with a soft reboot, I would say it's a bit of a stretch to label Sonic Heroes as one, since it does directly relate with past and future games. Sonic Heroes was clearly a different take for Sonic at its time of release, but I believe the intent was to treat it as an entry point for new fans of the series and thus was tailored for a wider audience. I also believe it was always Sega's intent to resume their typical trajectory after Heroes, and not that it was an attempt to change the rest of the series. A one-off, if you will. Surely, Shadow the Hedgehog is a reboot of some kind, right? Also, no. Despite how differently it presents the Sonic world, at its core it is still related to the rest of the series. The gameplay is built off Sonic Heroes, but returns focus to controlling a single character. The narrative connects to past stories even more than Sonic Heroes did, and it even features returning locations as well. If anything, the game focusing on Shadow is the main reason for its noticeable divergence, which further indicates that the direction of Shadow the Hedgehog was not Sega's vision for the franchise as a whole, just for a more Shadow-focused narrative. Now, Sonic 06 is the first contender for a reboot thus far. Like Adventure, Sonic 06 changes up the visual department to what came before it by becoming even more realistic in its environment and character designs. Furthermore, the story of Sonic 06 is self-contained. There are no important references to previous entries in the series present. In fact, Sonic 06 goes out of its way to change some of the fundamental rules of the series. For example, the Chaos Emeralds seem to allow time travel simply by bringing two together, which, if true before, would have changed events drastically. Furthermore, the blue Chaos Emerald Elise holds throughout childhood contradicts with every Chaos Emerald plot ever. There are a few key points that indicate how Sonic 06 is not a full reboot though. The returning characters of Team Sonic and Dark are given light introductions, and their relationships with one another are innately implied with minimal setup. Their familiarity and personalities rely on players having at least passing knowledge of their previous outings, and the game does not waste time re-establishing them, but instead continues to build off them. The gameplay also reaches back to Adventure 2, and once again aimed to then build upon it. At the same time, we see the Egg Carrier make a return. However, none of the characters seem to recognise it or comment on its historical significance to themselves. If this was a reboot, that should have been more directly addressed. I am sure most of you see what I'm getting at, but Sonic 06 is an example of a soft reboot. It clearly respects what has come before, and at times relies on knowledge of those games to help its own elements hit with greater impact, but it is also focused on establishing its own rules and characters. Most interestingly is how its own ending seems to tie the knot in the reboot it would have otherwise tried to set up, since it undoes the entire game's events. These factors all fit perfectly under the definition of a soft reboot, and I am inclined to treat it as one. Like I mentioned before though, a soft reboot can be worked around if not received well, and that is precisely what happened with Sonic 06. Sonic Unleashed would proceed as if Sonic 06 never happened, bringing in a brand new gameplay formula with the boost and the werehog. Ironically, Sonic Unleashed is actually a soft reboot itself. Not only did it bring the largest change to the series' gameplay in its history, but it also doesn't make meaningful references to past games. We know that the past games did still technically happen. The Supersonic intro makes it clear this was not Sonic's first bout with the Doctor, but we never learn any specifics about the past. Not to mention how Sonic Unleashed is a world adventure that takes place across the globe, yet we do not revisit a single familiar location. Empire City, for example, shares many aesthetics with Westopolis, Central City, and Station Square. You would think at least one of those locations could have featured in Unleashed, but no, it's Empire City. The absence of Sonic's friends during an apocalypse also feeds well into the soft reboot idea, since they don't need to be addressed if the developers wish not to. Unleashed is not commonly considered a soft reboot, but if you try to compare it to either Shadow or Heroes, it's quite clear the connections are few and far between. Sonic Colors is next up. The game keeps the gameplay from Unleashed and adds in the color power gimmick, but that is about all it carries on from that game. The characters are quite different in colours when compared to Unleashed. The least obvious is Tails, as he was already headed into this new direction, but the most noticeable is Sonic himself. His demeanour and humour are completely different, focusing more on juvenile jokes and slapstick, whilst lacking any of the deep and thoughtful traits he used to have. Narratively, just like with Unleashed, Colors does not reference past events, but character relations imply they still happened. Interestingly, Chip's bracelet is no longer present, but similar inconsistencies have happened before, like with the moon in Adventure 2. You may think it would be odd for Colors to soft reboot, after Unleashed soft rebooted the 06 soft reboot, but remember there were other games releasing in between these. Also, I didn't really consider Unleashed to be a reboot originally, but after looking at it again for this video, it really has the markings of a soft reboot. Colors, on the other hand, is widely accepted to be a major turning point for the series, but it is also not a hard reboot. Moving on to Sonic Lost World, this game is not a reboot either. Sonic and Tails have maintained their post-color personalities. The tone of the stories also still leans to the simpler and juvenile meta Tails, and some running jokes, such as Baldy McNosehair, are still present. Unfortunately. The gameplay is different, but during the 2D sections, you can still clearly feel the Colors DNA at work. Which brings us back to Sonic Forces as our most recent entry into the main series. You'll remember how the lack of familiar locations in the world was one of the reasons I classified Sonic Unleashed as a soft reboot. But believe it or not, that is inconsequential this time for Forces. Why, you may ask? Well, ever since the Sonic Colors reboot, there hasn't been a world-scale adventure on Sonic's planet. The games have been taking place on other planets or in pockets of space. Forces was the first time in a long time we were actually boots on the ground, so there is nothing for it to contradict with Colors. Additionally, it even includes locations such as Chemical Plant, which due to Colors only being a soft reboot is perfectly possible to do without rebooting again. The gameplay of Sonic Forces is mainly comprised of Colors and Generations mechanics as well. Sonic Forces is just another entry into the meta era, but it's not a reboot. And that covers the main relevant titles of the past 2 decades. Hopefully this can help clear up what it exactly means to be a reboot. As you can see, the Sonic games have never actually undergone a true full reboot so far, which is a testament to the brand's ability to survive practically anything. Sonic Frontiers is still a mystery at the moment, but if it is to act as a reboot, I would be 99% sure it will be done in the form of a soft reboot, much like back with 06 when it was trying to start a new era. Thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. I tried to be as clear as possible, but there is a chance I may have overlooked some key evidence, or maybe you have a different take on the more debatable games such as Sonic Heroes. Feel free to let me know in the comments below. If you enjoy my content, please share it so the discussion may spread. Have a great day, and I hope to see you next time. This is the Mighty Emperor, signing off.